With us today, as people are coming in, just go across the board here. As always, Mrs. Stacy Conrad, Executive Director of Communications, is joining us today, and she runs the show, and just happy to have her with me and making us all look good, sound good, and work it all out. So thank you, Stacy, for being here. Stacy will deal with most of the questions and the logistics of today's meeting. So you may get a message from her directly through the chat if we're going to bring you in or if you've asked a question. Reminder, put your questions in the Q&A. Also with us today, special guest we're excited to have with us, Dr. Henderson, Jeff Henderson, high school principal. Of course, Jeff is here today to talk with us about graduation. That's probably the biggest thing we're wondering about, and of course the end of year and closeout and some of the things that we're doing for all of our students plus our seniors as well. So Jeff, thanks for joining us this morning. Who's become a regular on the coffee chat, Mrs. Nora Hoover, our TNL, Assistant Superintendent of Teaching and Learning. Nora, welcome this morning. Nora's here as well. We do get a lot of questions about curriculum and instruction and what we're doing in that area. So thanks again for being here. Looks we're up to 58 participants, so we're probably getting really close to our number that we'll probably have join us. And then finally joining us again, been on a couple of times now too, is Jason Taylor, Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources and Technology. Jason's primary role today will probably be addressing a lot of technology questions, but he also helps us quite a bit. Probably his bigger job is that human resources side and dealing with everything we need to do to take care of our staff. So we have those questions. We know we have a lot of staff on the coffee chat this morning as well. So Jason says, ask me a question. I'm happy to answer it. Okay, so as people are coming in, we'll jump right in to high school conversation. And Jeff, I'll just open up the conversation with you and I, kind of just talking a little bit about what's the end of the year look like for our students at the high school. We know we ended on the 15th, but you know, the high school had kind of a trickle ending with testing and all of that. So where are we going from here?
Sure. So as you mentioned, direct instruction ended last Friday. We allowed students to complete late work and turn in assignments through 11:59 p.m. this coming Friday. And then teachers will have the following week to complete grades and submit everything through Skyward for transcript verification by counselors. We also still have a large number of students who are continuing to participate in online AP testing until the AP, all of the AP tests have concluded. Teachers will still have access to do tutorial sessions for students who are preparing for and studying for those tests. Following that, we have sent out some information about textbook and iPad collection for next week, and that's divided up by about 185 students per hour. We figure that's about the maximum number we can get through a line at a time to collect books and get those scanned in. Obviously, those students who are participating in summer school through Global Campus or taking ramp-up classes from the middle school will be able to continue to hold on to their computing device throughout the summer.
Great, great. So one of the questions that we've had over the last couple of weeks was in regards to our seniors, and that is kind of celebrating them. What are some of the things? I know we've got some really neat ideas and some things we're trying to do. You want to kind of talk through a couple of those things?
Sure. Beginning next week, after grades are due, thanks to the time and efforts and talents of Mrs. Conrad and her team, we're going to be able to display all of our seniors on our video board outside on Morgantown Road. That should start on Monday, I believe, if I'm correct. We are also in conversations with local authorities about the potential of a senior parade at some point in time in the not too distant future. We had one route that we had suggested, and due to some traffic concerns, as you can imagine, 600 plus seniors can clog up several intersections. So we're trying to work with some local authorities to see what we can create there. And then we're obviously preparing for our commencement ceremony, which is scheduled for Saturday, July 11th at 10 a.m. The intent is for that to be at Ray Skillman Stadium as an outdoor ceremony. We're waiting on further guidance from the governor's office and local health department about how many students will be able to gather and how many visitors will be able to gather at that point in time. Our hope is that we're able to have a large group celebration, but we also want to be respectful of what the current rules are at that time. We'll also be live streaming that commencement ceremony. We have some pre-recorded entertainment from our choir that will be a part of that. They've done a really, really nice job of continuing to engage those kids and have put together a virtual program that'll be included in our ceremony. We'll
Nice.
then archive that for later broadcast.
That's awesome. Yeah, and it's going to be a nice mix of things. I'm excited by that. I know. So I'm excited also to do it on the football field. It's kind of a different, neat venue. And I know I was talking with Mrs. Toomey, one of our board members. She said we had done that many years ago. We've done it like maybe twice, she said. And she said it was fun. Of course, weather is always risky, but I think 10 a.m. in July might be a better time than 2 o'clock in July, but we'll hopefully be able to get that done. So I'm looking forward to that. It could be really a beautiful event. And I did get a sneak peek of some of the things you guys got planned, and I think it's going to be really cool. One of the things that it makes me think about is there'll be some opportunities for our students here to have some virtual keepsakes for their lives that normally don't happen. So they'll be able to save some things electronically. We do have a question, Jeff, and this one is a question. I don't know if you see it, but it says, my daughter took a high school class this year and was an 8th grader, and she has her book for the class. Should she turn it into the middle school, or should she just hold on to it till next year?
Yeah, I see that. Kevin, good morning. Thanks for that question. I would just suggest, for your convenience, please turn it into the middle school, and we will take care of getting that over to the high school. We don't want to have to make you make 2 trips. So if you can just turn it in there, we'll take care of it.
Perfect. Great. So as you're thinking about graduation, there's going to be a lot of questions. We will have some more development on graduation. As Jeff shared, a lot of this will depend on where we are in the stages of the governor's plan and what we're allowed to do, and of course county health officials, and we have to get their approval on things as well. So we're moving forward as that goes. As right now it's promising that we're moving to stage 3. So hopefully, we get to that point in July. So I'm feeling pretty good and confident about it, and we'll just keep working towards that. Yes.
Rich, I would also say, we've had several questions from parents of students who, for whatever reason, those who are going on and selflessly serving in our military, or those who have other collegiate commitments or other things along those lines that will not be able to participate in the July ceremony, who need their transcript or their diploma prior to deployment. So we are going to make arrangements to make that available as soon as we have diplomas. Just like many other industries, the diploma printing industry was interrupted by COVID, and so they're running a little bit behind their normal schedule. Once we have transcripts verified and all of that, we'll be able to send transcripts right away. And then as soon as we get diplomas, we'll send out some more information to parents and seniors for those who are unable to participate and need that prior to the July ceremony. We'll make arrangements to make that happen.
Awesome. Okay, so keep coming in with your questions if you have some more about graduation and or high school topics, and Dr. Henderson will stay on here. I do see some more questions coming in about some curricular. Nora, I don't know if you're seeing those. So as those are popping up, we had a couple come in from, I think it's Mrs. Allen and Miss McCracken. You can kind of look at those and we'll answer those here in just a second. Jeff, one last thing. I know some people, and you did a really good job in the email, but we picked the date of Saturday, July 11th at 10 a.m. because it seemed to be the number one for parents in the survey, the parent survey, the number two for the high school students, the seniors. And we felt like that would be the best weather-wise to start at 10 a.m. and then to have that rain date for the next day on that Sunday. Is that I just wanted people to know that. And
Sure. Yeah. Basically, the survey results came back, and overall, the first weekend was the highest prioritized weekend by both parents and students. 2 p.m. was the most prioritized time by seniors, as could be expected. They like to sleep in and would rather have commencement at 2 o'clock in the afternoon than 10 o'clock in the morning. So we felt as though we didn't want to encumber 2 weekends with our 2 top priorities. Our top priority for parents was Saturday the 11th. Our top priority for students was the following Sunday at 2 p.m., followed very closely within 4 or 5 votes of the Sunday of the 12th. So we felt rather than trying to stretch those 2 over 2 weekends, if families were trying to plan vacations or trying to plan around other events that they had scheduled in their family, we only wanted to keep the actual date and the rain date within that 1 weekend time frame. So that's why we settled on that first weekend of the 11th and 12th.
Awesome. Great. Thanks, Jeff. Thanks. So Nora, couple of questions there. I don't know if you've had a chance to review Miss Allen's question. I think that one.
Yes, I have.
Okay. Yeah. So kind of restate that question a little bit for folks. I think they could see.
Sure.
Can see it. Yeah.
Mrs. Allen, thank you for your question. She's asked about flexibility for students to continue e-learning if parents aren't comfortable having their kids back physically in the building yet. And it's a great question. I appreciate it. And we are in our work in planning. We know that we need to make that accommodation, at least until we can feel students can safely come back to our buildings, whether that's because there's a vaccine or that's because we have treatments that work, whatever that is. But we are planning for that for our students and for our families.
Yes, that's a good question. And one of the things that really came up for us and our team pretty early on is we realized that we're probably going to have folks that are not going to be comfortable coming back until they're really confident in, the world in general and the health of communities and where we are with the virus. We also know that some people may just now say, hey, you know what, this e-learning thing really works for me and my family. And we want to continue to provide them with support, and we want to continue to keep them as Center Grove folks. So we're really looking at how we can expand our e-learning options, not just temporarily, but probably more of a permanent process. So we're working on that. So that's a good question, Ms. Allen, and hopefully we've helped with answering that. Okay, Mrs. McCracken, April's asked a good question here. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Ms. McCracken asked about, I'm going to separate this into 2, and she has a 6th grade daughter, as do I. We're in this at the same school. And she says that her grade 2nd semester were on track to be better, and she really hates for those not to be in her GPA. And I'm going to tell you, Mrs. McCracken, my daughters are exactly the same. They kind of had that transition slump in their grades, and they were lower than they had been typically. Not much, just a little, kind of like they do when they go into freshman year of high school or freshman year of college. but we had decided to make a decision when we went pass fail that we wouldn't be counting those in their GPA. So they would not be in their second semester, won't be in cumulative GPA for our K through 8 students. Now you also had another question, because I know you have a high schooler too. And I'm actually going to let Dr. Henderson answer that, because he has communicated this so effectively with his teachers. And I want to make sure he uses his words and I don't use his words, because I'll get them wrong.
Yeah, so when this began, obviously, none of us anticipated this, and none of us anticipated that it would last nearly this long. So we developed what we've referred to as some hold harmless language for students in order to protect those in our community that are most vulnerable and might have not the greatest internet access, might have some personal situations in the household that are impacting their ability to really concentrate on the schoolwork as much as they might like. So our hold harmless language basically stated that a student's third 9 weeks would be their lowest grade that they could receive this semester. We also have offered our PLC teams, which are our teams of teachers who teach like courses, who plan and collaborate the curriculum and develop assessments with one another. We've offered them the opportunity to establish the percentages of weight that they give to each 9 weeks grade. As you can imagine, some courses are a bit more challenging to do in a virtual environment than others. A science lab-based class, or family and consumer science with a kitchen, or technology education classes with robots and woodworking equipment and lathes and 3D printers and those kinds of things are a little bit more difficult to duplicate, and oftentimes have specialty software that may not be able to be replicated on the iPad. So we've given PLC teams the opportunity to establish the percentages, and then what they're doing is they're weighting each 9 weeks based on the percentage that they have established as a team, keeping the fallback that the hold harmless grade of third 9 weeks is the lowest grade that a student can receive. So right now they have the opportunity to improve their grade. So that's where we stand at the high school right now.
Awesome. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Nora. Good responses to that. Okay, I have a question here that's I kind of want to expand on. I think it's Mrs. Garrett, and it's a good segue into something I wanted to share with everyone. There's a couple of things, and so I've got a few email questions related to this, as well as today for Mrs. Garrett, and that is, her question is, the CDC has released guidelines for schools. How closely will CG schools follow the CDC guidelines for the coming school year? So let me share with you, and I'll put this on my screen here. I think I have it open. Whoops. There we go. Okay, so this is something I wanted to share with you, everyone, to kind of get an idea of the complexity of everything that the school district is dealing with. So we utilize this model. Some people call it a rapid response plan for school districts or any organization in general, but this will give you kind of the idea of how we're working through things. So we have a Superintendent's Advisory Council, which is made up of 7 individuals, counting myself. And also the board, the school board, participates in that. And that's, in this model, something called the control tower. We work on developing scenarios for every possible situation with COVID-19, particularly right now. But this kind of thing goes on all the time, and has for years in our school district, where we're developing scenarios based on how to deal with situations as they come up, or how to deal with new requirements. So let's just talk about COVID-19. So what we're doing in this particular area is our team the Superintendent's Advisory Council, along with input from the school board, we develop scenarios, and then we play out how those can carry forth in the school corporation. And obviously, COVID-19 has created quite the exercise for us in every area that we work in. And so to give you an idea there, you move over to the middle, we have our rapid response teams. So each of our assistant superintendents and directors work in these areas. For example, health and safety is over, Dr. Long, assistant superintendent, oversees the majority of those topics, along with Chief Jackson and Sarah Pitts, who's our director of transportation, and other individuals in those areas. And then also in social emotional learning and mental health, we have Heather Fosnot, who is our director in that, who oversees social or mental health and school counseling. And so she's working on plans in those areas. So as we develop scenarios, it's run through all of these different areas. And then finally, we've been a professional learning community school district for years. And what you can see, these are just some examples of topics that, for the most part, our principals oversee and run with their organizations, and we'll give topics. Now, a lot of this will also run through our rapid response team. So, for example, Mrs. Hoover, who works with her team on teaching and learning, which would be in that equity and learning recovery. And then Katie Brennan, who oversees our e-learning, our connected learning, and she's working through that distance learning piece. And then Dr. Paul Gabriel, who is our CFO, works on the finances and cost control. So with all of that being said, we run the CDC guidelines through this process, and it covers all of these areas. Everything from our students and how we interact with our students and bringing them back, to how our staff is impacted by these guidelines. And so we will get a lot of recommendations, as well as we'll get a lot of mandates. And we need to find the right balance between those recommendations and the mandates. Some of those things that might become a problem, for example, would be transportation. So I'll kind of talk you through that one. Right now, the CDC is really putting a highly tight recommendation on transportation, something along the lines of 14 students to a school bus that normally carries anywhere from 65 to 75 students. Right now, talking with our director of transportation, if that was a mandate, we would not be able to do that. We would need 20 additional buses or even more to be able to do that. So how can you do that and look at possibly doing a more, different schedule for bringing kids to school and rotating kids through school? That might be a possibility, to where we're only bringing a fourth of our students every day to school. Those are some pretty tough guidelines to work in a school setting. And so at the end of the day, we want to make sure that whatever we come up with as meeting the guidelines and or requirements makes sense to the community and to the students. We know that we realize parents are dependent on their kids coming to school. It's part of their childcare. It's so they can go to work. And so if we're forced to do something that doesn't have a guarantee for parents that their kids are going to be coming to school 5 days a week, what's it going to look like? And can they manage it? If it's a 2-day or a 3 days a week, is that even feasible? So as we continue to work through this and the CDC requirements and or recommendations, much of it we're going to look at, what can our community accept? What can our community deal with? And so we will seek input throughout the summer as we start to develop plans and as we get more direction from the state and the CDC. The guidelines, I've actually have them here and have highlighted them and chewed on them, and so is the team. We're really thinking through that. We got an email question in regards to the guidelines. For example, will masks be required of students? So I will tell you that we probably will not be requiring that unless it's a mandate. The cost and the ability to, require that of students and enforce that just opens up a door for a lot of issues. And while we will probably allow students to wear them, obviously, it's one of will we mandate it? Most likely not, unless we're told from higher above that it's a requirement. But so that's kind of give you an example of the CDC guidelines. And I believe right now masks are still a recommendation in the guidelines. They're not a requirement. So a lot of the CDC guidelines also relate to employees. And there's a couple of issues there that we're still looking at for our employees. We have folks who are in the high risk categories. What will it mean for them? And Jason, you want to talk a little bit about some of the things that we're considering when it comes to our folks in the high risk category and how we're trying to come up with creative ways to accommodate them?
Sure. Probably would be best just to kind of talk about our immediate actions. Next week, as you folks know, we are requiring some of our staff, or we're asking some of our staff members to come in to help with the student pickup and drop off of materials. That creates a lot of fear and some concern with a lot of staff members, especially those with the underlying issues. The school corporation, the school board has been very generous in allowing complete and total forgiveness of any absence that we need from our staff currently. And we're providing that paid leave time to those individuals so that they don't have to feel that burden of coming in and putting their health at risk. We've actually made it very flexible for anyone who wants to be exempt for next week. As we move in and start thinking about next year, obviously, we're going to balance that on-premise education versus that remote education. And that offers some options to our teachers who maybe can't physically come on site, like some of the parents may be concerned about sending their students on site. So we're looking to see how we can align the needs of our staff along with the needs of our students. And we think we actually can come up with some really good solutions to allow folks to continue to work for us, provide high quality education, but not expose themselves physically.
Yeah, so we're looking at just some ways to do that. And going back to the question and tying these two together, it depends on the number of students that we have that don't want to come to school for one reason or another, or their parents feel that way. We're hoping we may be able to tie that to staff members that can't or come or are not comfortable coming, and maybe we can create an online learning venue that will provide an environment for both the staff member and the student. So we're working towards that as well. So hopefully that answered your question. We're working towards those CDC guidelines, and I'll kind of share for those of you that have not seen the guidelines. They're out there on the web. We probably have a link somewhere that we can share. This is the document I'll share with you. School districts start on page 45, I believe it is. Yes. And so it's, you can see the guidelines there. I believe they go to page 52 for schools, and they have just some steps and recommendations on how to go through everything. And we've been working on that. Stacy Conrad's done a great job of getting more and more material out, signage and so forth, of getting us to focus on, improving our health, our hygiene practices in the school, and working with kids to do that. Hopefully parents have been really doing that a lot at home, so that, it's becoming a new way of life. I'm going to guess that this generation of kids are maybe the cleanest kids ever. So a lot of these topics are in here. Spacing seats, so forth, and stuff like that apart to promote social distancing. We're looking at how we can do that. So kind of takes me into one of the email recommendations, or I should say questions that we had, was from a parent, Lynette Weber, I believe. No, I'm sorry. She was commenting more again on the CDC and how tight those recommendations are. Will we be, have to follow them directly? And like I said, we'll balance those out. So unless we're just mandated to do it. I think another question or comment was working with local churches. How could we work with local churches, possibly taking advantage of some of the space? And we actually have considered, utilizing other areas to do that. And we talked a little bit about that, Nora, and I think one of the biggest issues that we had was our staff. Is that correct? And trying to spread our staff out. And you want to talk a little bit about that?
Right. Even if we've found more space to spread kids out, we can't spread the teacher out. There's just one person for so many kids. And that ratio with social distancing is really the problem, and trying to figure that out. But that's where we're going to look at some, if we need to do some e-learning that's live, so that kids sitting in the room that day are getting the same thing that the kids outside the classroom have access to also. And so, there's just so many questions there. And again, we don't know what stage we're going to be in and what the governor's going to tell us beyond July 4th looks like. So we're anxiously awaiting how close we follow the CDC guidelines, or what recommendations he wants us to move forward with. So
Yes.
A lot of stuff to think about.
Yeah, absolutely. Jeff, we had another question on seniors, and that was cords, senior cords. It actually came via an email to me, Mrs. Kenny.
Sure.
You want to answer that one?
Absolutely. So we are still waiting on all the cords to arrive. As with the diploma printing industry, some things got backlogged with regard to ordering all of those. I think we're very close. Right now, the plan is more than likely we will gather all those things together, box them up by student, or package them up by student, and then we will either mail those, or we will make another arrangement for a drive-through pickup of those. We're still waiting on the last to arrive to organize those, and then we've got to get some cost estimates on what it would cost us to mail those items out. But we'll be distributing those as soon as we possibly can, and we'll communicate with seniors and their parents once we have that plan finalized.
Great. Perfect. Okay, we have another question on e-learning. Nora, do you see that from Mrs. McDonald?
Yes, I do, but it's really a question about participation in athletics, and I would say activities, okay. Extracurriculars. So Mrs. McDonald, thank you for your question. She's asked about, if we continue with e-learning, will students be able to participate in sports? And another great question, I don't know if we have an answer to. At the high school level, and Jeff would know even more about this, the IHSAA has put out some things where practices can start in July. And I would say they're saying, yes, we can move forward with sports for next year. I think what maybe, there's just what participation looks like is one question, but also what does spectating look like? Because that's where our people are also bunched up, and we don't have access to test everyone probably before they enter a game like we can our athletes before they participate because of the limited number. So again, I think there'll be a lot of guidance, but I would say from the state level, it's looking like they want us to start moving forward with being able to have activities for the fall. And Jeff, I don't know if you have anything else to add to that.
Yeah, I would just say that we continue to wait on guidance. You know, this is a fluid situation and changes sometimes within the same day. So we are trying to be as responsive as we possibly can. Yesterday in the governor's press conference, the question of athletics came up, and somewhat of a bit of confusing situation is that they're allowing recreational sports to begin, but saying that high school facilities and school facilities are still closed through June 30th. So that can, in some communities and in some cases in our own, create some conflicts, because at some point in time, some of those community recreational leagues utilize school facilities. So while they may be allowed to resume, they may not be able to utilize our facility because we're still closed through June 30th. So we're still balancing all of those things. They were pretty clear yesterday. The governor was pretty clear yesterday to say that this does not mean that schools will open and facilities in schools will open at this time. Just those other public recreational athletic opportunities exist. The intent is that in the beginning of July that we may be able to bring our high school athletes back together for conditioning and preparation for a fall season, but we don't yet know what that fall season will look like, when it will start, whether it will be with spectators or without. And obviously our athletic programs are self-funded, and ticket revenue generated from fan attendance is what keeps those programs up and functioning and running. And so if we don't have spectators, that obviously puts our athletic department in a 100% loss mode for every athletic event they would host, because they would still have to pay officials and pay for transportation and all of those great things. So lots of things to consider, lots of things to balance with regard to that. And we try to continue to be as responsive to that fluid development as we possibly can.
Yes.
And it sounds like, Jeff, from reading the National Federation of High School guidance and all of that, they're still giving a lot of leverage to what the school districts and the school boards want to do within their own guidelines. So it's not really black and white. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, it is not black and white. And obviously the situation across the country is different in different communities. The spread of the virus in some areas is very, very minimal. And in other areas, it's still moving relatively rapidly. So while the federal organizations and state organizations want to give some overarching guidelines, they also want to be responsive to the fact that the situation in a particular community may be very different. We also have to keep in mind that we don't play just schools that reside within Johnson County. At the high school level, we're members of the Metropolitan Interscholastic Conference, which involves schools in Marion County and Pike. So we have to be responsive to the fact that Marion County may not progress as quickly as Johnson County. So while we might be able to participate here, there might be restrictions in Marion County that prevent those schools that we compete against from being able to participate. So it's a pretty complex set of circumstances that have to be navigated.
Yeah, absolutely. Switching gears just a moment here. Let's see, we had a question email wise, and it's a good question. It's a two-part. It says, what enrichment learning opportunities will students have access to over the summer? And will students continue to have access to learning apps over the summer, such as IXL, Reflex Math, etc.? These are typically unavailable during the summer months, but we would appreciate continued access given the loss of learning this time. And that is from Mr. and Mrs. Candris.
Yes, and thank you, Rich. He shared that question with me ahead of time. And we are working on that. Our directors of elementary and secondary teaching and learning are putting together resources right now for our parents, K-8, because our K-8 students don't have global campus opportunities to continue with summer classes like our high school students. So we want to now more than ever make sure our parents know what's out there, and that goes from everything from library programs that are offered to students that parents might not know about. We're trying to collect those kind of resources from the community, as well as what can we offer. And there might be some ability to offer those extensions for the program students use throughout the school year. So they're getting all that information together, and we'll be sending that out to parents, hopefully by late next week or early June, so that parents have an opportunity to see that and take advantage of it if they choose. Obviously, it's all by choice, but there's lots of good stuff out there for kids to stay engaged in learning over the summer.
Awesome. And yeah, and I would just take a minute to say, if you have the opportunity as a parent to get away and do something with your child this summer, I highly recommend it. If nothing else, go out and walk through the state parks or something. But you know, it's while you may have been able to spend more time with your family in your home, you know, disconnecting from technology and getting away, I think is going to be really critical for everyone right now, in spending a little time away from screens, really important. So if you can, which kind of takes me into the next question, because I would highly recommend it, because who knows what next year is going to look like. And you know, one of the things that we're planning for and looking at is the start time for next year. And when I say start time, I mean, are we going to start on time? Are we going to start the regular time? And that is one of our questions. Let's see, looking over at the question, but do we think there's any chance of starting early or originally planned? My guess is we probably will not start early, but our goal is to start on time. And what we're waiting for, honestly, is some direction from the governor's office and the Indiana Department of Education. There is some talk and about maybe being told we couldn't start until a certain date. For example, maybe it's after, you know, Labor Day, which has, if you know, Indiana has been an argument at the State House for many, many years. And I had a conversation with two of our legislators yesterday asking me if what I thought if they would mandate a start time just in general. Just put that on, you know, the state saying you can't start before this date and you have to end by this date. And I told them that I was not a fan of that mandate coming down from the state, that I really prefer that to be a local school board decision, because every community is different. We talked about that at length yesterday, and one of the reasons I gave them that I think a mandate is probably not in the best interest of school districts locally, going back to the discussion about sports, and the different counties are in different stages right now, and some may need the flexibility to start later and end later. They may have to take a big break in the middle. Who knows? Right now, Lake County and Marion County are still behind the rest of the state and may come in later. So mandating a statewide calendar doesn't make sense to me. So we're hoping that we'll start on time, but we realize we might need to make some adjustments in the year. And so we've got about 5 different scenarios that we're kicking around. I asked Jason to put together some ideas on that. Jason, you want to talk through some kind of just our overall thoughts on the different calendars for next year?
So the approach we took, like Dr. Arkadoff stated, is to start and end the year like we always have. That would be ideal, and we feel like that's probably best for our students. We then kind of took the option that we had afforded to us this year from the state, which would allow us to waiver out of 20 face-to-face days. And we applied that throughout the year in different areas. So one of those options could be using some of those waiver days to start the school year. It could be using those waiver days more in the middle of the school year to overlap with cold and flu season. And then it could also be much like we did this year, to end the school year if necessary. So we've kind of looked at that flexibility, and if the state were to offer that again or mandate it similar to how they did this year, that we could jump right into action on that. We explored some other wildcard options, which would be starting the year with e-learning, or using some e-learning throughout the year in different ways to kind of capture some instructional days. Our goal would still be to provide our students with 180 instructional days, or as close as we can get to that. And so we've got about 5 to 6 different options that principals and our teachers association are kind of looking at. We're not going to make any decisions until we get some firm state guidance. But we feel like when we do get that state guidance, that we'll have some idea of where we're headed and can move very quickly to communicate with our parents.
And that does kind of roll us into another question that I received electronically, email. And that is, with the recent decision from Carmel to make some start time changes, you know, that's been a topic for Center Grove for many years, even before I became superintendent, which is going on 10 years now. So this has been a conversation for a decade in the school district to change start times, and it's based on research. And as we're seeing more and more school districts across the state make that switch, I will tell you that we are probably destined to do that as a school corporation, that we will look at a way to make an adjustment in our start times in the next couple of years to align more with research for our high school and middle school students. The later start time for them has just a tremendous amount of research that supports how it's better for their mental health and their performance. And then, of course, our elementary students coming earlier. And for most people probably realize that as they, when they first have children, they realize that usually younger students, children are getting up at the crack of dawn and are ready to do things and are more rambunctious. And then they become more lethargic and grumpy, as Jeff pointed out, like to sleep in and have graduation at 2 o'clock as opposed to 10 a.m. So we are looking at that. We now that more schools are going that way, it would make sense for us to align with them just from transportation aspects, after school activities, all of those things. So that is on the table. But something that drastic in our district, we would not do that without having more conversation and giving parents lead time to make plans. So so basically what I'm telling you is we would not make that switch for next year. However, we are looking at it in the near future. So I wanted to kind of share that. I know that was something that came up. Carmel just recently made that shift, and a couple of other mixed schools have done that as well. So let's see, start of the school year, we answered that. Good question on 180 days from Mrs. McCracken. You know, I believe the state is talking about all kinds of adjustments to the day requirement, the seat time requirement. Have we heard much, Nora or Jason or Jeff, out of the state? I have not in those areas than everything else. Can everybody?
Rich.
I think your earpods battery just went dead, Rich. We can't hear you.
We have not heard from the state about next year. We understand
okay.
there were some concerns this year from a variety of sources about schools just closing early and cutting off 20 days. And so we expect if we do get that guidance from next year, that it probably will be with a little more oversight, I would guess. And so we wanted to prepare for that.
Thank you. Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, you're right. My batteries are dying. Okay. So we have another question there with so many unknowns at this point. of what CDC guidelines are for reopening schools and what CG puts in place? Oh, we don't know how many families, sorry, how many family kids. Sorry, I'm cutting in and out. I apologize. Let me switch this out as well.
Yeah, I think I can probably chime in a little bit there, Rich. We don't know currently. We also don't know what that first day of school is going to look like. We really are waiting, and we're hoping for that some additional guidance from the state. Obviously, the CDC guidelines are out there. That's what we have to look at right now. But I will say that's not what we're formulating our plans based on. It's just one consideration point. So I think the better approach will be, once we know what our options are, to share those with the public and allow them then to kind of select what their plans are to fit into what preparations we can make. And then we would actually be able to probably answer that question more and really put our firm plans into place. At this point, that could be early July if we don't get some communication from the state level prior.
Okay. I'm running into a little bit of technical difficulty. I apologize. I'm not sure why. I was going to try and do a poll. Last time we did a word cloud, and Stacy, I'm sorry, I can't get it to function for some reason. But we are interested in the concerns that you might have on sending your students back to school. So as much as I'd like to do it in this venue, I think we'll probably look at doing it in either at another coffee chat or through some other survey. But we definitely want to hear from parents. So I will just kind of follow up with saying, please be on the lookout for surveys coming out. Encourage everyone to take those, because those are going to be really important for us in planning. And so a couple of things that I can see us probably asking all of you would be, are you planning on sending your child back to school when we open? What's the most important things we do for you and your child to make you feel safe? You know, what are some of the CDC guidelines that are just really important to you, and what are some that are just, you know, don't worry about? We'll be crafting some surveys. We'll try not to overdo it. However, we really want your input on this as we serve you and your kids. And we want to make sure you feel safe and your child feels safe coming back to school. And we want to make sure we do it exactly as the right way as we can. Nora, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I did want to share. I know our first parent survey, or the one we did little past halfway through e-learning, was pretty general. Our plan was to send a much more detailed plan to end this school year. And actually, the DOE partnered with an agency called Panorama, and they have a very comprehensive survey they're offering all schools in Indiana to use for free, and we'll get great analytics. The other thing it'll offer us is then we can kind of compare ourselves to the rest of the state. Where were we stronger than some districts? Where are we weaker? So it's a really comprehensive survey, and we're going to send that out to parents next week. It's actually, we'll send them a link where they go onto the DOE, pick their school, and then the survey starts. And so we wanted to encourage all families, and we've got great parents here today and staff members that can spread that word, as you just said. I think a survey much more specific to our planning, as Dr. Arkanoff said, will probably come early July, later in June, where we're going to ask people what kind of choices they would make for their families. But the survey now will be really important for us planning for what those options are going to look like.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we hear more and more from the governor and from the Department of Education, you know, that will help us really formulate a better plan. And that's why we're waiting. And you know, it's somebody said it to me the other day, but boy, it does feel a little bit like Groundhog Day. We've got a number of scenarios and we've been running through them over and over again, and some things change and then some things just never change. And as much as you can try to make changes to those things, it just doesn't, you can't. And so we're really working on putting together that plan as best we can. One of the things I promise you as we're wrapping this up today is that we'll continue to communicate. And even when we don't have an answer, we're going to tell you that. We probably don't have an answer for a lot of things, but we want you to know, don't hesitate to ask us. And please understand that we'll let you know if we have the answer, or if we're working on one, or if we don't. And we'll continue to strive to make it the best experience we can as we go into next year. Is there any last minute things that folks want to share out? Stacy, have we covered everything that we need to today? It looks
Yeah,
like
I think so. I just think with all this really important communication coming out, I just want to remind everybody to double check all of your contact information in Skyward. We get a report every time we send out a communication from the district or one of our schools that lists a lot of people whose emails bounce. So double check your emails. We also have a method of doing text messages now through Skyward, but you have to enable that in your account. So just go into those parent preferences and make sure your emails are updated. I know a lot of us, we change from Comcast to AT&T or whatever, and then those emails change and you forget to update them throughout the year. So just make sure that all of that is up to date, because that's the best method that we have as a school district to get in touch with you. And that's what your schools are using as well to reach out. And if you hear there's been a communication and you didn't get it, send an email, communications@centergrove.k12.in.us. We'll track it down and we'll figure out why it didn't go through. So it could just be a typo in your email, whatever it is, but we want to make sure everyone is getting all of that communication.
Absolutely. Thank you. Okay, is there any last minute questions from any of the attendees? Let me see if anyone's come in, and I don't see anyone's raised their hand. Okay. Well, as always, I just want to thank you all for joining us today. We will be doing this in 2 weeks. So we're pretty consistent on having these, so every 2 weeks. So we will see you all in 2 weeks and hopefully have a lot more information to share with you. So thank you very much and have a great day and stay healthy.